Before I begin my analysis of Torment Tides of Numenera, I thought I'd do a preamble about what happened in the development leading up to its release. It's nice to know little factoids on how things came about and why and the problems the project went through, so that I don't have to ramble on about them in the actual analysis. This will have nothing to do, actually, with my analysis. This is just nice to know from someone who has helped fund the project, seen its betas and alphas, and know a little bit about the history of this thing. So this was almost a 4-year development cycle. One of the largest Kickstarter campaigns for video games was $4 million. And even after the campaign, it raised $870,000 on its website, so you can make donations to it. One thing about one of the main questions that this game wanted to address was, what does one life matter? And this has to do with the concept of a legacy. That never sat well with me. That is not a philosophical question. At least I've never encountered it in philosophy. And it's more of a subjective thing. It doesn't really speak to humanity. I think, what does one love matter? What does one friend matter? That might do something more personal. This is like trying to establish, well, why am I playing this game? Why is this character the protagonist? That should never have to be questioned by the audience. You may as well be asking, what does one game ending matter? Well, that should definitely be scripted and made very clear. So you shouldn't have to question the legacy. And I'm not sure exactly what legacy, the theme of legacy, in relation to the ending was supposed to be. This was also originally called a spiritual successor to Planescape Torment. A lot of news reporting when Numenera was announced said this was a spiritual successor, and then it wasn't because it just simply wasn't. Then they started saying it was a thematic successor. Now, I had a huge problem with this as well, because there is no such thing as a thematic successor. What you're doing here is you're saying, hey, you know that thing you really like called Planescape Torment? We're trying to do something like that. And we're borrowing its theme, so it's going to be a thematic successor. Any writer worth their ink would never say this. This is bullshit. Okay? Themes, plots are universal. Using the theme of redemption or any other themes from Planescape, I mean, so what? You could pick any story that you might be popular with or you enjoyed, and say it's a thematic successor. So it's kind of a really stupid thing to say, and I'm still trying to fathom why they did that, aside from making people interested and making people want to buy or invest in their product, if you can call Kickstarter a form of investment. I remember the betas that were coming out. There was no hit points, for example. Everything was based on the might, speed, intelligence pools, and you would use that in a form of effort. So if you want to do an attack, your chance to hit would increase if you use more of your might, speed, intelligence based on the type of attack you were doing. And the next update had hit points, so it's like, oh, it's a big change there. They also changed portraits. People were complaining about the look of the character portraits, and that's normal. I mean, that's not a big deal. Then there were the technical efficiency upgrades. Like, I could barely play the beta, and they made it playable, even on my gaming rig. So it was initially unplayable. It wasn't optimized. That's normal. That's fine. Then came up the combat engine voting. I would say this is a fiasco, really. They asked the community to vote on what kind of combat engine you would make, even though this is absolutely something you should never ask. You shouldn't ask. This should be part of the core design. And again, this is another way of saying, yeah, we don't want to do a successor to Torment or Planescape Torment. We're going to do our own thing. Just do your own thing. They were already slanted to doing turn-based. Just do it. But they had this loaded voting where they were going to do turn-based anyway, unless it was really skewed to real-time with pause. And you had all these people, hardcore RPG guys, who of course love turn-based because they like pen and paper, and that's just their thing. And it was just a bad feeling for them to go to just people. Like, it was very close voting. It wasn't this huge thing. And to do that and to find out the results of what their opinions of what the voting would have been if it was different, was really not what you do to people who've given you all this money. And then came the long list of broken Kickstarter promises. I'm going to go through them because I think this is important. There was next to zero customization towards your character that I could think of. There's no portraits, no colors, tattoos, nothing like that. There was an orchestral score that was dropped from the music. Like, they didn't even allow that for Mark Morgan, which I thought would have been awesome, but yeah. There were only 3 of the classes, which was, the standard is warrior, mage, and rogue, or thief. There's only basically 3 stats associated with those classes, the might, speed, and intelligence, so you're not really min-maxing anything, you're just increasing your pools. There's no what they called foci, which is a form of customization, so either upgrading your class, like your glaive would be like a melee glaive, or your jack would be a stealth-based jack. And this is already, like, these classes, these upgrades already exist in the Numenera tabletop game. I think there's 5 or 6 dozen, so there's all kinds. All they had to do is take them, and they never bothered to implement that. There were only 2 cities, or 2 hub cities, I guess you can call them that. I don't know if they were like a handful, 2 or 3 dungeons, I think. So there's not a lot of maps, even though the maps are very beautiful. Like, it looks great, but there's not too many of them. There's not too much exploration going on. And for a game based loosely on real-time with pause or the Infinity Engine style isometric games, that's not a good thing. Let's see. There were I would say about 5 or so combat scenarios they called crises. And one of them was also the tutorial. So yeah, combat, all the big stink they made about combat didn't really amount to much. And I really don't think if this was turn-based, if this was real-time, it would have been any better. Crafting was removed, and crafting was a multiple stretch goal. So weapons, armor, Numenera, ciphers, anything you use in battle, consumables, that sort of thing. Those were dropped. Those were gone. There was another hub world called Oasis. And Oasis was actually the title of one of the music by Mark Morgan. One of the first pieces of music we heard about the game that was memorable. Like, if you look at the soundtrack they gave you, this music is totally forgetful compared to the music in Planescape Torment. You could list all kinds of music from there. Characters, scenes, the menu screen, everything is memorable there. There were 6 companions in total, when there was about 9 that were promised. I believe 1 or 2 of them were non-human. One of them was the toy, or the ball of goo, which I was really looking forward to. Again, multiple stretch goals. Those were dropped. One of them ended up becoming 2 NPCs in the game, which I thought was interesting. But you forget about all these goals after a certain point in time anyway. There were factions, and there were cults, I think. And multiple posts, this is even after the Kickstarter they were talking about in the forums. There is one faction in the game that you can choose and join, but it's not like how in Planescape Torment you had this little icon at the bottom of your character sheet that said, oh, you're part of this faction. It's just a choice you make. There was a mechanic that was talked about where you could transfer pain towards your party, and each of your party members react differently. I thought that was rather cool. And of course, one of the companions that were dropped would have actually liked that. So, if you remove the guy, and if combat is not a focus, then there's really no need for this pain mechanic. There was a list of legacies, and again, I'm not too sure if that means endings or if that means the tides. And there was 6 in total. There was supposed to be 11. I don't know if they were dropped. I don't know if they were forgotten. We don't know what those were supposed to be, if they were anything. There was also Italian localization, which was not a stretch goal. This was part of the base Kickstarter project and just wasn't there. They didn't do it. I think there were backer NPCs. I'm sure there must have been, because there's so many NPCs, and it was part of giving a certain amount of money. But there were definitely backer memorials, the same way how Pillars of Eternity had all those memorials throughout the game. I really hate this thing. I really do not like having to read names and stupid one-liners that have nothing to do with the story. In this game, it was actually done a little bit better, but you're still navigating all these screens and all this nonsense. And it was like a side quest, I think. So, it happened. I was like, it wasn't as bad. It's still bad, though. And then there was the console port. All kinds of slowdown problems. Obviously a delayed release, as most Kickstarter projects are. All kinds of bugs. And then they had to download a patch, which is unheard of. This was like an 8 or 10 gig patch. I can't remember the size. It's just like, whoa. Patches on game when they come out these days is normal, but 10 gigs, wow. For a game that's mostly narrative, it's a little strange. And Colin, the guy who's in charge of the project, he goes on to say that he was not expecting the script to jump to 1.2 million words, which to me, if you're making a narrative-heavy game, that's just bad planning. I mean, there's 3 things you should be doing making a project of this size, and it's the small, the medium, and the large. And this has to do with scope creep, and yeah, you always have to fight that off in any project. But your goal in any project, whether it's going to be big or small, if you have time to do things, is going to be referred to as called the minimum viable product, or the MVP. And it's pretty much anything to get your foot, or get the puck in the net. Give what you promised, deliver on time. And then, then you get to choose, once you deliver, then you do a mix of what you can do and what you need to do. And it's this sort of, okay, we have time to do more work. So let's start doing the things that we really want to do. And if you're really efficient, if you're really good at nailing out all those deliverables on time and exceeding your efficiency standards or scheduling, then you can do even more than what you wanted, and you can impress people more. You certainly had the time and money. This project had plenty of time and money to do that. So the worst case scenario would be you're just not very smart. You weren't expecting this. You were not predicting your project would blow up this size, and then things get set back. And that's pretty much what happened here. Now, Colin did address some of these issues. The problem was he addressed them years or a year, if not years later. And the thing you have to think about a Kickstarter project is it's really just a glorified donation box. Once you put that money in the box, it's gone. I mean, you can cancel your donation, but once the funds have been collected, that's it. And let's keep in mind what a Kickstarter is to the people asking for money. They are making these promises themselves. They may be told by their current donators or other people what they want stretch goals to be, but they're the ones saying, I'm going to do X if you give me this amount of money more. No one told them to do this. They didn't have to have these stretch goals. They could have done easier stretch goals. Even after the campaign, they were still raising money. So, to do that, not deliver on the stretch goals you said you were going to do, and then have another donation box for $870,000 that was raised, that makes me question a few things. And especially if you're a writer, and this is a writing or a narrative heavy game, You can combine any series of characters, events, especially in the Numenera setting, and make it entertaining, make it dramatic, make it good. I could probably do all that within a week. I'm not saying I'm a genius. Probably wouldn't even take that long to plan it out. Yeah, I'd have to make some concessions here and there. I'm not saying it'll be perfect, but it's all on paper. It's all theoretical, and then you start fleshing it out. But that's what you're supposed to do because you promised you would. And it took him apparently a year to tell everyone. I think it was last month or January he wrote his apology in the forums. Now, I don't know if that was a year ago from 2017 February, or there's a year after the Kickstarter for him to notice these things. But it took him till a month or 2 months before release to say, oh, by the way, we're not going to do all those things we said we were going to do. And in the real world, meaning the non-Kickstarter world of software development, that's unacceptable. That's to put it lightly. I could say a lot of really mean things right now, but I'm not going to do that. Because I have been fired in software development for not delivering on certain dates and not communicating properly. And I would say that communication is way more important than your skill as a developer or a writer, your experiences, your past amazing things you've done. If you can't communicate, especially to people who have given you millions of dollars, you should get fired. It's that simple. So yeah, these are some of the things I wanted to just get off my chest, because when I do my analysis, I won't even mention these things. But I think people should know where this project went and what happened to it. And hopefully you'll have a better appreciation of what went into this thing and the trials and tribulations that people went through and all the expectations and the well, some of them were good, some of them were bad for this project. But I hope we all have a jolly good time analyzing the crap out of this thing. And hey, maybe you might want to play it after that. Who knows?